All right, so it's been a few hours now and the freeze dryer is pretty much defrosted. There was a few little pieces of ice in there still. There was one on top and one on the side, so I guess there were two. I pulled them out with the little grabber doohickey and then I tipped, let me put this up here first, and then I tipped the whole rack, rotated it like this to make sure that any standing water was poured off the top or on any of the shelves. So now, let me get it ready for the next batch. So the water in that was over a gallon, about a gallon and a pint, so a little bit more than a gallon. So now I'm going to use the little grabber tool and some paper towels. And I don't do this every time because often I've given it enough time to completely dry. But this time there definitely could be little drops of water in places. So I just want to give it a quick sweep with the paper towel. And see, there's a couple of little drips there. And I'm going to come down along the side. Same thing on the other side. It's looking pretty clean. And just kind of wipe across the shelves. I don't see anything on the shelves, but this will help collect any dust that might be on the shelves. And one more time underneath. Yeah, so a very small amount of moisture was on that in the freeze dryer still. Not much. I'm going to go ahead and get it set for the next batch. Again, we're taking things out of the freezer that have been waiting, some of them for months, waiting for their turn, trying to get things kind of caught up and gone through there so we can start new batches. I have a kind of a plan on where I want to go. I've got some comparison videos that I'd planned for 17 months ago. I bought some commercially made freeze-dry pouches so that I could compare it to homemade ones. Well, they're still sitting in the box. Well, I opened the box and looked at them. I even opened one bag up and compared them to our own. I just haven't done any video about that, but it looks pretty interesting. I think we could make a better version of some of the things. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the commercial ones. In fact, the ones I bought are my favorite commercial brand. I love them. It's Mountain House. But they have to appeal to a wide audience of consumers. So it needs to be more palatable to a huge group. I want to make the recipe that I like. Plus, a challenge that they have perhaps is that the expectations of freeze-dried food users, they want their freeze-dried food to rehydrate in a very short time. I've had people ask, well, why does it still have a dry spot after 5 minutes? Well, some things take hours to rehydrate. Some of these things took 40, 50 hours to freeze dry. We shouldn't expect it to be able to rehydrate in 5 minutes. So I think that's one of the reasons the commercial companies tend to cook, or not cook, well, they do, the good ones I think do cook all their food. They make the recipe and then split it up. But they tend to cut their pieces into small pieces, like 1/4-inch pieces. That would help them rehydrate. So the bigger the piece, it's going to take longer. I like my pieces of stew, for instance, to be twice as wide, twice as tall, twice as deep, which means they're 8 times the volume of theirs. It's going to take more time to rehydrate. Anyway, I should talk about that when we get to that video. For now, let's get this set. Get the door closed. I don't have a ring all the way around the door. I'm going to use the palette knife and just give it a little twist. I had some gaps right here, and there's a couple of little gaps up here still. So, okay. Now we've got a complete ring around that seal. I won't have to worry about air coming across there, especially moist air, and freezing a ring around there. It'll still work, but you'll have a few seconds or maybe even a few minutes of a little bit of air infiltration through there when the vacuum starts, to melt that little bit of ice. Or at least that's been my experience the few times that has happened. It still works fine. It just takes another couple of minutes to achieve vacuum. Okay, let's get this started. I'll get the drain valve closed. Going to use Customize to start it. And when you use Customize, you get a chance to adjust the cycle times, which would be the next screen. I have it set for 6 hours freeze, 11 hours final dry. I'm going to leave that there. And at this screen, you have a chance to set the shelf limits. I'm going to leave it at 120 and then start custom. So I don't change those. I almost never change those unless there's some specific food I'm trying out at a higher or lower temperature. So I pretty much leave them alone. But it takes you past that screen each time. Okay, and then we'll continue. And it says it's only 62 in there. It won't take long at all to get it ready, cold enough to put the food in. So as soon as that's ready, we'll get some food out of the freezer and get them onto the freeze-dried trays. So we'll be back in a few minutes. Once again, we're back to the freezer trying to empty out a little bit of that shelf, especially my sister's shelf, because she wants to fill it up like crazy. So we'll get that going. Going to get a couple of the corrugated plastic pieces to keep the trays and the food kind of insulated from the rolling cart. And we've already segregated some pieces out. So we have 2, 4, 6, 8 full pieces of, I think, spaghetti sauce, and then 4 half blocks of another item. And you can see that's finally starting to get pretty empty. Got one more batch here, and then some cookies over there. I still have some stuff of ours down lower and up above, but hers is almost finished. We'll get everything moved over to what we use as the bagging table and get them loaded up. So let's get these loaded. Got tray 1. Got blocks of spaghetti sauce with hamburger mixed in. So that's what I'm going to be putting on these trays. And I'll go ahead and put this tag under one of them. Okay. And I'm not really sure what these are because there were no labels on this particular bag. But hopefully she can figure it out. I mean, it looks like there's carrots and maybe onions or might be hashed brown potatoes. And then looks like some sauce. I mean, I don't know. I just don't know what it is. So tray 1 is 1902. Tray 2, we'll go ahead and put one of the half ones on there. Whoops. And these blocks were actually from, I think, months ago. I think these were in the freezer since long before they even started the first 50 batch series. So they've been in there for 5 or 6 months waiting their turn. So this tray is 1919, tray 3. And the trays, of course, are quite cold because they were in the freezer while they were waiting. And 1870 for that tray. And tray 4. Yeah, I was afraid of that. That one's a little bit longer. So my sister, when she was making her half blocks, she didn't have any of the dividers. So she waited until the food in the 7x7 pans was almost set up, almost frozen. Then she'd take a spatula and put it in there and wiggle it back and forth to open up a gap in the middle, or as close as she could tell is in the middle. So sometimes they're not exactly, and so that one's like up on the edge. And that's going to be a little bit of a difficulty, but we'll just I think we'll let this side stay up on this edge, and because the angle as it dries, it should fall back down into there. Now I'm going to try to get some thermometers in these next. I'm going to figure out how to get a thermometer in there. If I go on the top like that, it still should fit. So if I take the drill right down there, I think that'll work. It'd be weird. Hopefully it'll fit. And of course I want to stop before I drill into the tray at all. That would be bad. Okay, that looks like it'll work. We'll get all 3 trays, all 4. We'll get all 4 trays all thermometered up and get them in there. So this one, yeah, you can see this one was smaller. You can see how it's kind of piled up in the middle. That's the way she does it. I'm going to turn it this way. That way I've got a thinner edge here. to start drilling into. Okay, that's as good as I'm going to be able to get for that set. We'll get moved over to the freeze dryer and get them put in. With those trays moved over here, well, it's time to get them in. The freeze dryer has been running for about an hour and 3/4 now, and it's down to negative 30 degrees. But I was busy doing other stuff once again, so I don't worry about it if it goes a long time. Sometimes the 6 hours even runs out or comes close, and I have to add more time just to keep it from going into the dry cycle. So I don't worry about it, I just keep it running, and that's one of the reasons I like to do it in the custom cycle. All right, so we'll get this open and get them in there. So starting at the bottom and work our way up. Tray 4, get that in there. And 3. Let's check those thermometers real quick, just out of interest. 10 degrees, this is the one that's a different brand. 20 degrees, 10 degrees, about 6 degrees. So they're all nice and cold. We'll make sure we get a seal ring all the way around there, and okay, yeah, there's a ring all the way around the seal. I don't have to worry about air leaks, especially during this freezing part. And it still has 4 more hours for the pre-freeze. That should be enough. Even though I put the food in late, they're still quite cold. The freeze dryer is cold. It should pull it down quickly and have no problem. So we'll see you back here in 2 days. So don't go away, it'll just be a minute. The batch of spaghetti sauce and whatever else the other thing is, finished a little while ago, and I don't know exactly how long ago because I wasn't down here. If I didn't have the thermometers in the food, I would rewarm it before I tried taking them out, because I wouldn't know if it's already so cold that I'm going to get condensation on the trays right away. But because I have those thermometers on the trays, I can see that the temperature of the food is still 60 to 80 degrees. That's definitely on the borderline, because that means that tray is going to be cold, and the bottom of the tray, at least on the bottom one, will probably get a small amount of condensation, though it's not very humid here right now. However, I'm going to be putting it back in because this is for the dry check, so I'm not going to worry about that because it is warm enough that it's not going to be a big problem. If it were colder than this, say the warmest tray was 60 degrees and some of them were down at 30 degrees, I definitely would rewarm it first. But because I know this, with the thermometers in there, I'm going to go ahead and take it out without any rewarming, get them weighed, and then get them back in there. So first, we'll get the drain valve open. So opening the drain valve, let the air in so there can be enough pressure that I can pull that door open, or equalize pressure. Okay, we'll start with tray 1. Okay, 1108, tray 2, 1108 again. Okay, so now we'll switch the positions up there. And the trays are, they're slightly warmer than, so slightly warm to the touch, just barely though. So it's not down to room temperature even. Okay, then tray 2 I'm going to put up at the top. And tray 1 I'm going to put down 1. So tray 3. And tray 3 is a little bit cooler. It's definitely cool to the touch. And it's 1088. And tray 4. Tray 4 will come up 1, and tray 3 I'll put down 1. I'm going to restart that with the more dry time button and give it just a couple of hours before I check it, maybe 2.5 hours, because then if it's dry it'll be ready to bag. If not, it'll have to go a few hours more because I have other things I have to do during that next period of time. So let's get this restarted. I'll close the drain valve first. More dry time. Drain valve is closed. And this will tell me, okay, so it's been off for about a half hour, because it does count down for an hour for cooling. But again, I don't worry about that because it's got the fan blowing on it at all times. So restart it. And then I'm gonna bump it up to 2.5. That way I can get at least 2 full hours before I come back and check it. Yeehaw! We'll be back in a couple hours or just a second. So we bypassed those last few minutes. Now we'll get them out again. So I opened the drain valve already, and we'll get them out and check them. Okay, starting with tray 1. And the coldest one, the heaters have been off for about 11 minutes. And now the coldest one was the top one at about 105 degrees. Everything else was warmer than that. It's 11:07, so that's down by 1. Tray 2, 11:07, and before it was 11:08 and going down to 7. Now it's 7, pretty solid. It bounced up to 8 once, so a portion, so part of 1 gram. So far looking good. Tray 3, and these are low enough I don't have to worry about them touching. 1088, so no change on that one. And tray 4, 1093, so maybe 1 gram on that one. Looks good though. We'll get those moved over to the bagging area. We'll go ahead and stop this using no defrost, and then we'll come back over here, check the time and the power usage, and then go get them bagged. Going to get my little defrost baffle in. I should make a better one that fits better. I've been using this one for years. It's just a quick cutout piece. And I'll wait to turn this on until after we come back and get the power usage and the time, so we don't have to listen to it. So the time is showing just about 41 hours when I stopped it. So I'll use 41 hours for my time. The power usage for the spaghetti sauce and the mystery stuff is 27.07 kilowatt hours. I'll reset that. Okay, now it's ready for the next one, and the electronics of the Harvest Rite is using 3.5 watts. Now move over to the bagging. So the 16 cups of spaghetti sauce with hamburger in it is done, and the 4 cups of who knows what are done. So we'll get the final weights without the thermometers and then get ready to bag them. And with these, it'll be pretty simple. We'll probably kind of crush those up and put those in a bag, and these we'll wait to find out, see if we can figure out what it is. It looks like a rice dish to me. So maybe rice and pork or something, because I can see little pieces that look like could be rice. And then there's onions and carrots. It looks like celery, ham or something. So it's definitely a meat and something else. It looks pretty good, just don't know what it is. Final weights without the thermometers. So starting with tray 1. And as always, as we powder this up and bag it, if we ever see or find any cold spot, damp spot, ice spot, whatever, everything will get crushed and put back in. Well, not necessarily crushed, depending what it is, but it'll get put back on the trays and back in the freeze dryer for more time, regardless if we found no weight loss. It's never happened. If there's been no weight loss, we've never found any cool spots or damp spots. So since we started doing it that way, we've never had a problem again. Before that, we would get almost everything bagged and then find one spot somewhere inside that we're crushing it up in the bag, and suddenly there will be a damp spot on the bag, on the Ziploc bag. So then we have to pour everything back out and do it again. Okay, so that was 1099, and tray 2, 1098, tray 3, 1079, finally tray 4. And 1085. Now, got the weights. We'll kind of try to figure out what they are now. The weights will be, the importance of the weight on these are going to be more academic, because I want to know how much water the total batch is. And it'll give kind of a guideline on kind of the maximum of water to put back in when it's being rehydrated. So we'll plan on using a quart bag, but after we crush it, we'll see if it'll work in a pint bag. It just depends on the size of the particles and things. So we'll have the batch number written on the bag. We have the batch number on the tag, what it is, the date it went into the freeze dryer, And then the amount before was about 2 cups. And then we're going to add a water weight here, so to add up to this amount of water until the desired consistency. So usually when we're doing sauce type stuff, we'll add somewhere between 3/4 or 90% of the water, kind of let it set for a bit and see if it's the consistency we want. A lot of sauce things, if you give them extra time, so a half hour instead of 10 minutes, they will continue to absorb the water into all the cell structures and get thicker. So immediately it might feel too thin, but it might get thicker over time. So anyway, this will give us a number to shoot for, or a maximum that we would know that if you put more than that, it's going to be thinner than you started. Okay, so be right back with some numbers, or with bagging. So here's how it all worked out. Originally, when we put them on the trays to start the batch, it was approximately 10.2 pounds total of food, and now it's just about 3 pounds. It lost 7.2 pounds of water. So we're going to assume that these were even when they started, which they weren't exactly, because again, measuring out by volume, you're not going to get as accurate of a weight as if you weighed them out. But they work out to about a pound apiece. So for the amount of water needed, we're going to so they might be slightly underhydrated. But for sauces especially, I'd much rather have things with a low amount of water and just need to add a little bit. I'd rather have it thick sauce than thin sauce. So that's the way we're going to work with those. And we're going to see how these crush. These might not crush well. They might have too much structure, in which case we might have to use a bigger bag and just break them in half, because these feel pretty solid. Some things that have sauces seem solid and they break apart easy. So we're going to give it an attempt. So I got it in a Ziploc or a zipper bag. These are not Ziplocs. And okay, that's not bad, because I don't want to crush it so much that it, like these nice pieces of onions and the pieces of hamburger, we don't want to powder any of this. We just want to break it apart from the sauce so we can pour it in a bag. So I'm not going to use the rolling pin on this time like I do actual sauces, like the nacho cheese sauce or gravies, thin gravies that don't have bits in it. So we'll look at that. I'm going to guess though, because of the bigger sizes of this, it's going to need a quart bag instead of a pint bag. So we have a quart bag set up for it. It looks like it was the right choice. So that looks like that's going to be broken enough to get into a quart bag. You'd have to have it just a plain powder to be able to stick that in a pint bag, and don't want to do that to it. There's good sizes of ground beef in there. Yeah, there's nice pieces of onions in there, so I don't want to powder it. The advantage of doing this bag though is now we can just pour it into here, and you could certainly use like a big canning funnel, but then it becomes almost a two-person thing, and you could use our scoop too. But I find if the pieces aren't too big, I can just kind of shake them down into there. So that fills, I'm going to give it a shake, settle it down. Yeah, I wouldn't want to fill it any higher than that. That's going to be a good amount. It's full, but it's going to zipper easily. Okay, I'm going to switch this out to a heavier bag though. So we'll label the rest of the bags and then come back for these. These will kind of stack in pairs. They started their life as pairs and they need to stay together. So we know that these two started together, and so they evened the other two. So we'll keep those together and bag those in a little while. Got a heavier bag now, so hopefully that'll do better. That should do it. Broken up, but not powdered. So there's a lot of ways you could do this. You don't have to use a bag to crush them. Like I said, you could, let me grab the next tray. You could just break them in half or something similar to half and then put them in a bag like that. However, when you go to rehydrate them, you probably want to stack two on top of each other does better. Even though that seems pretty harsh pounding, it just kind of breaks up the sauce. It doesn't seem to be harming the hamburger size or the onions, and I think there's celery in there. some carrot pieces too, it looks like. I'm sure that's a piece of celery. Anyway, so it doesn't seem to be breaking those up. All right, so this is what we've got left. And again, I'm not sure what it is. I can identify a lot of the parts without taste testing it, which seems like a good plan actually. It's hard to know what it is. So let's figure out which one weighs more than the other. 100, 110,
111,
109. So they're almost the same. Yeah, that's pork. Okay, so some kind of pork rice casserole kind of dish. So I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's definitely rice, pork, carrots, onions. Tastes pretty good. I was going to bag these in the 2-quart bag, but the new 1-quart bags that we got are a full quart. And you can see they're about 3/4 of an inch to an inch taller. I'm going to give this a try before we label it to see if they will fit standing up in there. Because they're the gusseted bottom bags, 7mm Mylar bags. Going to see if it will fit and seal.
you can break off 2-3 inches off the top and slide it into the side.
Okay. It will seal. I can actually get it zippered shut too. So we could break off a little piece of the top, but it does make it. So that would definitely change what we've been doing there. Because especially if we just break off a little piece and use that, that will allow, and then these 2 little pieces can be just tucked down there and I don't have to crush the rest of it. Because I'm concerned about crushing it because of the big pieces of pork in there. Because this is, that's a good sized piece right there. So I don't want to break that up. If I knew exactly what it was, I might not be as concerned, but this has got some pretty good sized pieces of onion. I don't want to powder those, because when things are freeze-dried, they're pretty easy to powder, but they'll come back to full strength after they're rehydrated. Okay, and since there's only a couple of these, not bothering to pre-print tags. So we've got them all bagged in 1-quart bags, though 2 of them are in the new, bigger 1-quart bags, the actual 1-quart bags. The old ones were only 3/4 of a quart, but they were still called a quart bag. It's what we've been using for the last few years. So it's nice that they've finally gone to 32 ounces for a quart instead of just 24 ounces. We're going to add 300 cc oxygen absorbers to each one of them, and then we'll zipper them shut and then heat seal them. Because remember, zippering them shut, even if these zippers are really good, that's no substitute for heat sealing the top of it. So we'll get these in there. Okay, now I'm going to tuck it down the side so that it doesn't end up in the zipper on any of those or the seal. And then going to push out any extra air I can if there's any space at the top. And you could certainly vacuum seal these or something like that. And sometimes I use a straw and suck out any extra air. Partly it depends on what it is. With oxygen absorbers in all of those and they're zippered shut, it's time to heat seal them. We have an impulse type sealer and it happens to be Impact brand. I'm real happy with it. It has a 5mm wide seal. It seems to be pretty much the same as what Harvest Right is sending out now, except theirs looks a lot nicer and it's branded with theirs, so they must have it built for them. It's a really nice looking sealer. And apparently it has all the same features and works the same way. So I have mine set to about a 6 when I'm doing these bags. And I like to do the first one twice to make sure that it's really up to temperature and sealing properly. And I'm sealing all the way up on the top. It leaves myself room for 2 or 3 more tries down here, or if I want to cut part of it off, I can. So we'll get those sealed and then they'll be ready to go back to the owner. One more thing we'll add on each bag is a gross weight of the bag. Oops, need to have that off of there so I can have it zeroed. Then we'll weigh each bag and write the weight on it, and if it's bouncing between 2 numbers, I like to take the higher number, and that tells me what it weighs right now with everything in the bag itself, everything. So if it starts to fail and let water in, it'll get heavier. And I'll be able to tell just by putting it on the scale. So as far as the seal and how much heat, you can test it. So you can test how much heat your sealer needs. One of the things you can do is I've got one of my old thin bags that we use for big things that aren't going to be staying all that long. And then the 7 mil bag, this is part of a pint bag. And it had a wrinkle in it, so I wasn't going to use it. So I cut it up to use it for test pieces. So I can cut a strip off of it. Okay. And I can cut the sealed parts off of it. Now I have 2 separate pieces. I'm leaving the inner sides together because the outside pieces are metallized. They won't seal. So then I'm going to just seal it. Okay, I'll wait a couple of seconds. Now I've got that seal, and then you can test it. Is it sealed? And they're quite strong. If you've got a good seal, it doesn't come apart easily. It ends up stretching it and actually breaking it. So it's breaking it right along the seal edge. If you heat it too much, it'll break too easily. And if you don't heat it enough, it'll break too easily. So you want that to seal completely so that it takes a good amount of strength to pull apart. Anyway, so it's completely melting that inner layer together. And on this other material, so again, I'm going to cut the seal portion of it off. So I've got 2 layers of this thinner material. Okay. So even that with the slightly thinner bag, it's just a really good piece. So it completely peeled the plastic off, and it just has the outer layer of the mylar piece on the one side. And the rest of the plastic is peeled off of that and stuck to this side. So even that was a great seal on this. Anyway, so if you think you're not sealing it well enough, so if I turn it way down, let's see if this will, yeah, see that peeled apart easily. It left parts of the plastic on both sides. It wasn't hot enough to really seal it properly. So somewhere in between there is the range you want. You don't want it to fail on the seal. So next, they'll all get sealed, and then those can be moved to storage. Okay, you can handle those.